Hello and welcome back to the 20 Years of Women on Boards podcast with me, Claire Braund, the co-founder and CEO of WAP. Today we're talking to Helga Svendsen, a facilitator, leadership and executive coach, non-executive director and podcaster. Her current board roles include the Board's Ministerial Advisory Committee for the Victorian Department of Health, the Workplace Injury Commission and the Greenpeace Australia Pacific Nominations Committee. Helga is also a bike enthusiast, a dance teacher and an avid walker, but more on that later. Hi, Helga.
Hi, Claire. It is so lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Total pleasure. Helga, our early years are very formative in shaping our values and our choices and who we are. Can you tell us a bit about your early life and the influences that have shaped you?
Sure. So I grew up in Diamond Creek, which is the northeastern suburbs of Melbourne. Back in those days, it still is quite leafy and bush-like, but back then definitely was leafy and bush-like. One of the influences, many influences, but one of them was my dad Jack, who was involved in everything. He was on the Diamond Creek Town Fair Committee. He was involved in the school kind of council. He was involved in the local food co-op. He was involved in, getting decent drains on the dirt road that we lived in, all sorts of stuff. He was a real... if something they're doing, he was the person who would do it, whether it was getting people parked in the right place at the Diamond Creek Fair or getting food to people or whatever it may be. And seeing that, for me, I think I just grew up thinking, well, that's what people do, don't they? They get involved in things. So I did the same. At school, I was on the school council as a student rep, on the student newspaper at school. When I went to university, oh my gosh, involved in everything there, from the Law Student Society through to, again, the student newspaper, the student union, all of that sort of stuff. I think just watching that and it just, taught me to be involved in life and get involved and to make a contribution.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it sounds like you grew up in a sort of almost like a semi sort of rural area too, really. And mine was a rural area. So my dad was on the Sports Ground Trust. He was the president of the PNC for the duration of all three of our tenure at that primary school. And he was then on the Ebor Progress Association. And Ebor is a town of less than 100. So the fact that you can have a Progress Association is in itself hilarious, because the stories that happened with the Progress Association as well, they are fascinating microcosms for the rest of life, really, I think.
I had forgotten that. My father was also involved in the Progress Association, and no doubt there was all sorts of interesting stories that came from that as well.
Yep. Nothing like a bit of progress. They got to have it in those rural areas. But a really great point. At uni, you trained and practiced as a lawyer. So obviously you did a law degree, and then you moved into the Australian Services Union as an organiser, and then as an assistant secretary. What attracted you to the union movement, and what are you most proud of during your years working with the ASU?
Yeah, so I had been a private practice lawyer. So when I finished university, I went and practiced as a personal injuries lawyer. I practiced down in the Latrobe Valley of Victoria, so kind of mining country, forestry country. Certainly lots of personal injuries at work to be dealt with. So I worked as a personal injuries lawyer down there for a while, then back in Melbourne for a while, and then I moved to the union movement. And I think what struck me about the move to the union movement, and I'm not sure that it was so well kind of enunciated in my head before I made the move, but I felt like as a lawyer, someone hurts their back at work or whatever it may be, someone gets injured at work, they come to the lawyer, you sue somebody, you get them some money, and then they go away. But it's a very reactive process. And as a union official and as a union organiser, working with groups of workers in whatever workplace it might be, developing the workplace leaders, really making sure that power relationship in the workplace is a bit more equal. I felt like that was a really proactive approach to ensuring that whether it's health and safety or all sorts of other things in the workplace, it was a much more equal relationship, and it would stop things happening before they happened. So what I loved about that was, the proactive nature of it, the leadership development and the empowerment. It was, I loved it. I was at the Australian Services Union during this will put me fair and square in the age bracket. But anyway, the mid-90s through to the kind of late 2000s, I guess. And one of the industries that I organised in and, then oversaw as assistant secretary was the airline industry. Now, 2001 in particular was a pretty tricky time for the airline industry. And I remember there was a particular week in September 2001. On that Thursday morning in Australia, the ASU had planned for national industrial action across the airline industry for the first time in many, many years. It was due to happen 12 hours after September 11 happened in the airline industry. Now, my phone, I think, first buzzed at, 10 p.m. at night or something whenever it happened. And there was, let's say, a bit of a flurry overnight to call it off. I mean, obviously you couldn't go into national strikes on that sort of day, but it had to happen overnight because things were due to happen at 6 a.m. So there was quite a flurry of activity, shall we say. And then the trauma that the airline industry was feeling, that everybody was feeling, like it was an incredibly traumatic time. And those in the airline industry, I think, felt it particularly. So that happened on the Thursday, I think it was. But within a week or two, Ansett stopped flying. So it was an extraordinary time. And as the person who kind of led, I guess, the Victorian members, and for Ansett in particular, Victoria, head office was based here, so it was the largest union, was our union. And for me, what I am super proud of is the way we brought those members together, first up to deal with the trauma of the workplace that they worked for closing down, essentially stopping flying, looked after them, looked after their entitlements, got entitlements paid. One of the members gave me, you probably remember the scarves they used to wear, the yellow, blue and white scarves. One of them gave me her scarf and I still have it about 20 years later. She gave it to me because we had worked together so closely. So I am really proud of our union, of our members, of the union movement at the time, really protecting those workers both emotionally, socially and financially. And I treasure that Ansett scarf. It is still in my drawer and I absolutely treasure it.
What a lovely story. So having cut your teeth on leadership in the union sector, you then moved into government in a facilitative role before becoming the CEO of the Hotham Mission Asylum Seeker Project. So talk us through the threads that connected these chapters in your life.
Again, I think sometimes it's only when you look back that you can gather the threads. For me, when I was leaving the union movement, I loved being in the union movement, but I had been there quite a long time, probably 15 years, I guess, by the time I left. And whilst I loved it, I did feel like my learning had, I'd gone off the steep learning curve into something that was a bit more even, I guess. So moving into Sustainability Victoria in the Victorian government opened up a whole new world of work in the sustainability sector, people and government. So the people, government and the processes and the way that worked. So I found that incredibly fascinating. And I remember feeling like a kid that's just gone back to primary school because everything was new and I had to learn a whole bunch of new things, bringing the skills that I already learned, but in a different environment. And then likewise, when I went to the Asylum Seeker Project, I mean, what a privilege to work with the incredibly strong, resilient people that were seeking asylum in Australia to a country that wasn't particularly, well, probably still isn't particularly sympathetic or empathetic to people seeking asylum. So I think the threads for me were really around, there's a bit of a human rights thread, I think. I see the union movement as a human rights organisation in some ways, probably more so now sustainability is also around human rights, and obviously the Asylum Seeker Project was around human rights. And the other thread that I see in it is really about empowering people. That is definitely what the union movement is about, and I think it is likewise definitely in the asylum seeker sector and even in the sustainability movement, having people know and understand and empowered to be able to make positive change. So I see that those are the threads in the work that I've done. Again, I'm not sure I saw that at the time, but that's certainly how I can look back on it now.
In 2010, you graduated from the second cohort of the highly regarded Williamson Community Leadership Program, which of course has spawned many, many, many leaders across multiple sectors. How did this change your life?
I think It's interesting thinking about the Williamson program. Often people do come in, and because it's a community leadership program, it's about building leadership skills, not just at work, I guess outside work as well and in the community, which is part of what I loved about it. Although it's fair to say I was quite involved in the community prior to doing the program. So I know there was definitely some people who got much more involved in the community after doing that sort of program. I'm not sure that that was the real thing for me. But what is extraordinary about that group, it is now 16 years ago, and it was a group of people from the private sector, from the public sector, from the not-for-profit sector, from self-employed to large corporations. And that network of people, 39 people in my year, we still catch up. We still lean on each other for input, advice, support, whatever it may be. One of the mantras of Leadership Victoria is always take the call. So we will always take the call for each other, and indeed for other Williamson alumni or Leadership Victoria alumni as well, take the call. So I think that's the thing that I have taken from that, is that not only can I take the call, I can make the call if I need help from anybody within that network.
Love that. Take the call and make the call. I think that's a really nice mantra. Around the same time, you also developed your interest in strategy and governance more fully. So what was your first NED role, non-executive director role, and how did that come about?
Well, it depends on how you count it, isn't it? So I guess in some ways my very first one would have been when I was at school. Obviously didn't hold director's duties because I wasn't 18, but I was on the school council, which was a governance role. It wasn't a non-executive director role, but it was definitely a governance role. Later in my work, I was on what was called the Community Services and Health Industry Training Advisory Board, snappy title, as part of my job. So I was definitely, I was the deputy chair of that board as well, and quite involved in a number of things with that one. But it was through my work. The first independent role, I guess, that I took was the YWCA Victoria. Now YWCA Australia, but back then Y Victoria. And I saw that role advertised. So I was still in the union movement at the time, and because the union movement has a strong connection to the community sector, as I was leaving the union and going into government, I wanted to maintain that connection to the community sector. So I started looking around for a board role. When I saw the YWCA advertised, I confess I thought, well, the YWCA, I'm neither young nor Christian. I'm not sure this is the role for me. But when I looked into it further, realised they were actually a very strongly progressive feminist organisation. And indeed, not all of their board was young. Some were a little bit more experienced. So applied, was very fortunate to be appointed to that board. And that organisation, possibly as an organisation that had been around at the time for 125 years, had very strong governance. And it just got me hooked. Those boardroom conversations, the power of a good group of people coming together and nutting through a gnarly strategic challenge. Oh, I was hooked.
So where did that first role, or that first sort of meaty governance role, let's probably put it the way, on an independent board with the YWCA, fine organisation, totally agree, lead you in terms of board service?
So as the YWCA, as all good organisations should have, I believe, had a maximum term. It was a little shorter than a number of them. It was a 6-year maximum. So I think I joined their board in 2009. So I knew my term was coming to an end in 2015. And knowing that it takes a while to find your next board role, I think I probably started looking maybe 2014, maybe early 2015. And I mean, it's a fishing expedition finding the next board roles. It's lots of cups of coffee with people, or cups of tea in my case. It is fishing around for what is advertised. It is fishing around for what is not advertised. Oh, I would have to go back and have a look at how many I actually applied for, because I suspect I applied for a number of roles before landing my next one, which was on the board of the Royal Women's Hospital, one of the Victorian health services. I am very, very grateful to say that I've continued to then build that. I'm now hit my maximum term on that board as well. So have, as you said, am now the chair of the Workplace Injury Commission, on the Victorian Government Board's Ministerial Advisory Committee for the Department of Health, the Greenpeace Nominations Committee, was formerly on the Basketball Australia Nominations Committee, which for anyone who's met me in real life, you'll know that I am the shortest person in the world to have ever talked about basketball. So, yeah, now totally hooked on it.
Mind you, the former chair of Basketball New South Wales, Jenny Dean, is not a mightily tall person herself, may I say. So
that is very true. I've met Jenny, and that is true. She is a tad taller than me, but you're right. She's certainly not of basketball height.
So you've served on a range of Victorian government boards, which you just mentioned, primarily in those areas around health, workplace injury. What attracts you to those roles, and what's challenging about serving on government boards?
Oh, yes. Okay. So what attracts me is, again, it's the opportunity to, I guess, make an impact in organisations that make an impact. And I guess any organisation does that, but I think government organisations who are very clear about public value, that is something that I guess burns strong in me. The flip side of that in some ways, what makes it challenging, which I am very strongly aware of, but sometimes people are not aware of when they join a government board, is that it is a government board. Your shareholder is the government. Your key stakeholders are the government.
Well, the minister.
The minister. You are there mostly, depending on which organisation it is, mostly at the minister's pleasure. You are appointed by the minister and it can be taken away by the minister. So I think if, sometimes I hear people on government boards saying, well, the government might have this wrong or that wrong or whatever it may be. You're on a government board. If you're on a not-for-profit board, you have, freedom within, or a corporate board, you have freedom within the usual constraints around what resources you have available to you to set your strategic direction. Whereas on a government board, that is to some extent and sometimes to a large extent set by the government direction. And so I think people on government boards just need to know that that is the bounds within which you play. There is still, I think, amazing work to be done in terms of delivering public value and delivering impact and doing amazing things, but it is done within the bounds of a government board.
Since 2013, you've built your own consultancy in leadership and strategy, but also around encouraging people to take on board roles. What's the biggest misconception that people have about what it takes to get their first board seat?
Oh, gosh, I think there's a couple of misconceptions. And one is that, you can just go off and do your career in whatever it may be and then snap your fingers and just develop this board portfolio, which will be, easy to do and there'll be satisfying boards and it'll all pay handsomely and there won't be much risk involved and it'll all be lovely. I'm not sure that's how boards and board portfolios work these days. It is much more complex, I think, than it was 10 years ago and even 20 years ago. There is much more risk involved because of that complexity. And there is, rightly, I think this is a good thing, boards are now looking for more diversity, equity and inclusion on boards, which is excellent. But it also means there is a larger pool of people and there's just not that many well-paid boards out there. There are plenty of not-for-profit boards out there, and I'm a strong supporter of people being on the boards of not-for-profit organisations, but they are not always unpaid, but might be unpaid. So, yeah, I think the misconception is that you can just snap your fingers and land yourself a well-paid, relatively easy board portfolio and, swan around the golf course for the rest of the time. I'm not sure that that's the reality.
No, I agree entirely. And of course, it's getting way tougher and there's much more a much bigger regulatory space as well. So how do you coach someone who's looking for boards but who's really brilliant in their field but never actually sat in the boardroom?
Well, first up, I think someone who's really brilliant in their field, particularly if they're looking for executive roles, should start looking for board roles, not as their next career, although it might be, but because it actually makes you better in your job. If you work to a board or work with a board or around a board, then being on the board of another organisation is going to make you so much better at your job because you will understand what it's like to be, have that oversight of an organisation and not know all of the nitty-gritty. So then I think if people come to that realisation, and I hope that they do, I think it's really about ensuring people get out of the weeds of the nitty-gritty in the day-to-day and think about the long shopping list of skills and experience that they have and focus on those that are most relevant to governance. So focus on the oversight skills, focus on the strategic skills, focus on your risk skills. Don't focus on things like, I don't know, your project management skills or whatever it may be. And, yeah, really consciously chunk up into that high level, whether it's the helicopter view or the starry night view, really consciously chunk up into that.
So switching topics, Helga, we mentioned you're a keen bushwalker. You've hiked Kokoda, Machu Picchu, Mount Kinabalu, the Overland, of course, in Tasmania, and completed the Oxfam Trail work. You're also a keen bike rider. You've taught dancing and competed at national level in modern jive. How important is it in life to do the things that bring you joy as well as the things that keep a roof over your head?
Oh, my goodness. So I have just got back from hiking the Larapinta, doing 14 days up in Central Australia. I was away from the phone. I was away from the internet. I was away from I did it as a group. I didn't carry everything because I'm not sure I can do that these days. I did on the Overland, but I'm not sure I would these days. So I was with a group with some guides. So they looked after everything. I didn't have to think about what to cook, what was for dinner. I didn't have to think about anything. Every night over dessert, they would say, right, tomorrow morning, breakfast is at 5:30. We're on the trail by 6 or whatever it may be. We'd all be in bed by 8 o'clock. And then you just get up the next day and walk. Oh, Claire, having that brain space. I didn't listen to a podcast. I didn't read a book. I didn't have any access. I did occasionally. The only thing I would do is message my partner with a couple of photos saying, still alive. And he would send back photos of the cat going, all is well here. It just gives your brain space to think. And that's our duty as directors. Our duty is to think. Our duty is to be able to really nut through important things. And if we don't give our brain space to do that, I read an article just before I went about if we don't give our brain space to do those sorts of things, are we really exercising due care and diligence to discharge our duties? So in some ways, I think directors need to see taking a step away as part of their duties rather than stepping away from their duties.
So tell me, you've been a WOB member for many years, thank you. And in that time, we have discussed your board career has really taken off. So looking back, how important has WOB been to you and your board journey?
So it was only when WOB was coming up to it's the 20th birthday, right? Happy birthday to you and thank you for all that you do. And it was only when it came up to the 20th birthday that I thought, hang on a minute, I reckon I joined in 2007 or 8, somewhere around there. And in my head when I joined, WOB had just been around forever. So it was interesting when the 20th came around and I was like, oh, I must have been a very early member. I remember coming to an information session you held in Melbourne, again, probably around 2006 or 7. And I remember Ruth saying, if anybody wants to reach out and have a coffee with me about board stuff, then please feel free to do so. Now, I'm the sort of cheeky person that takes somebody up on that sort of thing, so I did. I reached out, and one day when I was up in Sydney, we went out for a coffee and she gave me some advice about board things. I think that was after I joined the YWCA, but I feel like WOB's advocacy, particularly the advocacy, but you don't call it the jobs board anymore. What do you call it? Where all the roles are?
I do in Parliament,
okay.
Yeah. The jobs board will do.
The jobs board, again, I just had lunch with somebody earlier today and was saying the Women on Board's jobs board is the best one. Like if you're going to look it's the best out there. The advocacy is amazing. The community is amazing. And it just makes me feel supported and seen. So I think the work that Women on Boards do is incredible. So thank you. Thank you for all you do. It's amazing.
Thank you. So as the number of women on boards, of course, continues to grow across all sectors, and it has jumped so much in these last 20 years, and WOB enters the next decade, what's the next frontier?
So I think the whole diversity space is the next frontier. Even when I started thinking about boards and so on, I thought a lot more about gender equality in the boardroom. And I think the conversation now has moved to diversity, equity and inclusion in the boardroom, and I think that's a good thing. We need to get way beyond it just being pick a woman, any woman, to ensuring that boardrooms have diverse people across the board. And that we're not, quite frankly, just replacing all the old white men in the boardroom with old white women in the boardroom. We need some of the men and the women to be people of colour, people with a disability, LGBTQIA+, First Nations people, and so on and so on. So I think that is part of what will make boards stronger in the future. I mean, all of the research shows diverse groups make better decisions, and that's what boards are. They are a group of people who decide and guide and support. So I think diverse boards will be part of the future, and what I'm hoping is that also inclusive boards. I feel a little like we've got to the point where there might be diversity in the boardroom. I'm not sure it's always experienced as inclusive by all of those people, and there's work to be done around that. And I think the other thing that needs to be grappled with, and I don't know how this is going to play out, but is obviously technology and AI. It blows my mind to what boards might look like in even 2 or 3 years' time, let alone 5 or 10 years' time, and what technology might look like. I have no idea, but I know they will look very different.
Thank you, Helga. And finally, what are 3 words you would use to sum up your journey over the past 20 years?
Again, this is very difficult. So I wrestled with this a lot and interestingly got it down to 2 words, Claire, and that is stronger together. I think boards are stronger together, groups are stronger together, communities are stronger together. I have felt stronger when I'm together with others. So, yeah, I think stronger together is what has guided me and will continue to guide me into the future.
Helga Svendsen, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me. And again, thank you for all that you do.